Hello everybody. So I just finished the CEO presentation of MSTR stock. MSTR, of course, just reported its Q3 earnings. Business as usual is the idea that comes to mind. We don't have any big surprises, and that's good because Q2 we had a big surprise and that made the market dump. You know, when in Q2 they said we're not gonna ATM under 2.5, the market didn't take it well. To me, they played it safe. This is very much a play it safe earnings call, and we are bouncing back in after hours, and so that is pretty good. Let's talk about the presentation. So first of all, you can see they're all in on Stretch. Stretch, of course, was the best IPO of the year, but it's also their biggest IPO and their biggest source of capital, especially going forward. They're going to keep going all in on Stretch. They are going to focus on distribution. They're very happy that Stretch and all the other preferreds are listed through Robinhood. But Saylor talked about how they're going to do more digital marketing. They launched a strategy app, and they're going to do field marketing. They're going to do conferences. They're going to talk to investment advisor to promote Stretch. I really get the feeling that Stretch is what they're betting on. They're kind of betting the house on Stretch. They also talked about international expansion. We already knew Japan wasn't going to be a thing for strategy. Looks like they're not going to go head to head against MetaPlanet. They are targeting Canada and Europe, and these are pretty big markets. We knew that he was targeting Europe. Canada is the first time I hear him say Europe. I knew he was targeting it, so maybe expect at some point a preferred instrument in Europe by strategy. That would be my guess that it's going to happen. They talked about the credit rating, being very happy about being a B- credit rating. Of course, that's a junk rating, but they used the very politically correct term of high yield rating, and that they were talking about how that opens up more capital. Namely, they are moving from 2.8 trillion of pool of capital that they used to access to now 4.9 trillion. Their goal over time is to be at least a triple B. That would do an 11x compared to where they were before as far as the capital to access. So you still have almost a double of capital pools available for all of the preferred. So that's actually a big deal because companies who could not buy the preferred before now can, just because they have a B- S&P rating. Now, they talked about the S&P 500. Of course, a lot of hype last quarter. I think it will take them a very long time to get added to the S&P 500. They actually mentioned Tesla on the call, saying it took Tesla a long time and nobody really knows their criteria. But, you know, they're hopeful, and this is going to be the second inclusion window in September. That's going to be the second inclusion window for them to possibly be added to the S&P 500. Of course, I don't think that's going to happen in November. Watch out for that hype. I think it's going to take multiple quarters, just like it did for Tesla, just like it did for Coinbase or Robinhood, for example. They talk about the Bitcoin target. Of course, I cannot understand how Bitcoin traded at 106 today after the best macro news out there. No more QT, rate cut. We had a China deal. I don't understand the price action except that it's manipulated. But they talk about the analysts following them having an average price target for Bitcoin of 156 and a price target of MSTR average of 587. So, you know, we all kind of struggle to understand why MSTR is so cheap. You know, I struggle myself, and all of these analysts. I mean, you're talking about some very high level firms. You know, like Bernstein, Wainwright, you know, Mizuho, Stifel, TD Cowen. These are Citibank. Think about it. These are major firms predicting this. Now, reaffirming guidance for 2025. Yeah, that's unfortunate. That's very unfortunate. I think a lot of people were expecting that they would raise the guidance. But given the state of the capital market in Q3, it's not surprising to me that they reaffirm guidance. In fact, I would have been fearful that they would have actually reduced the guidance. Well, they didn't do that. That means they're very hopeful for a good Q4. And so by that, we mean a good November and a good December. They're very hopeful. If we have a November, December on fire, I think they can achieve that guidance. If November is as bad as October, I don't think we can achieve that guidance, but we'll see. That's not a big deal, not a big problem for a long-term holder. I don't own this stock for next quarter. I own this stock for 2030 and beyond. A novel announcement today, though, is they took the opportunity to let us know about the stretch increase. Last time they had issued an 8K to let us know. This time they're letting us know in advance within the call. They're going to increase, as of in 2 days, they will increase the yield by 0.25%. They are forcing Stretch to trade at 100, and when Stretch trades at 100, you will have the Stretch ATM tsunami. They will issue Stretch left and right. Once it trades at 100, they're raising the yield to force the stock to trade at 100. That, coupled with the rate cut, which is that we got on Wednesday, which is slowly making its way through the economy, those two things together kind of work as a scissor who's squeezing that stock, squeezing that yield and squeezing that stock up. So they're forcing the stock to trade at 100 by raising the yield. I think that's very clever. Whenever it's at 100, I expect the capital to flow in a much stronger way in a stretch. And lastly, and I think that's a new tilt of the presentation, that's really the novel part, is the ROC, return of capital dividend. They call it a ROC dividend. Works very well with the Sailor narrative around Manhattan and granite and all that sort of stuff. Anyways, the return of capital dividends is a very, very big deal compared to the taxpayer who is in the 37% bracket. Of course, for the sake of explanation, they take the highest tax bracket in the United States, knowing that they are trying to address, wealthy individuals, essentially. And yeah, on qualified dividends, most people pay 15% tax on qualified dividends. Wealthy individuals pay at least 20%, right? And it could be up to 35% or up to 55%, and that depends on the state you're in. If you happen to be in a tax state, you could be taxed even more. Well, guess what? Return of capital is taxed at 0% until you write down your cost basis to zero. So that's roughly for the 10 first years of owning these instruments, roughly, give or take 1 year. For the 10 first year, you don't pay capital gains taxed, and then after 10 or 11 years of owning these instruments, depending on what type you buy, you will start paying the qualified dividend tax. And so because of that, they are now presenting the returns in a ROC dividend. And the ROC dividend, so the return of capital tax adjusted dividend compared to other instruments, sound really, really, really juicy. And it is juicy to the point that strike and of course for strike you gotta remove the $26 worth of call option premium. If you remove that and you calculate the yield based on that and you add back the tax that you would have to pay strike, you actually get a yield of 21% ROC adjusted. Stretch 16% ROC adjusted. The fact that this is return of capital is a really big deal, and over the long term, this compounds. And if you assume a reinvestment, this compounding yield to plus 44%. So you are over 100 after reinvesting in year 10. You turn 100 into 269, and that's 44% more than what you would have if you were taxed every year if you didn't have return of capital. So I expect this to be a big narrative going forward. They are forcing Stretch to yield to yield more. Thus, it's going to be at 100. Thus, they're going to be able to ATM. Thus, they're going to be able to earn a Bitcoin yield, and that's why they think they're going to achieve these targets. So overall, you don't shake the boat. They didn't rock the boat. This is a steady Eddy quarter. And I think that's what strategy needed, given all the FUD that we've had. Steady Eddy quarter, I'll take it. So anyways, this was not financial advice. This is not investment advice. This is only entertainment. I hope you were entertained. Please like, please subscribe, follow me on Patreon, follow me on X. Thank you for watching, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.